The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, January 17th. I hope everybody is doing well, finished up the week well, and having a good weekend. I am here. I apologize that no show yesterday. Just had meeting upon meeting upon meeting. I was hoping to get to a show, and just last minute stuff just crept up, and I had to cancel, so I apologize for that. But show today, and hopefully next week will be calmer, and we'll be able to do shows all next week. So hopefully that'll go well. All right, we're gonna jump into the topic in a minute. We're gonna talk about three things today. Basically, we're gonna talk about the idea of constitutional republic, what it means, and where we are in terms of its applicability to the United States of America as of January 17th, 2026. We'll talk about that. I'll give you an update about Iran and what is going on there, and kind of I don't know whether we can be hopeful or not, or what the likely scenarios are in the days to come. But I'll give you an update on Iran, and then finally I owe a final review of Forks in the Road. So the final essay in Forks in the Road, and we'll cover that at the end of that portion of the show. Of course, you can ask questions about anything. That way you get me to talk about whatever you want me to talk about. So please use the Super Chat feature to ask questions. We have kind of the questions have a monetary value. I reply to them in order of monetary value. So the more you put down, the sooner I answer the question. But I do get to all of them. So feel free to ask as many questions as you want on whatever topics you want. I read them all out loud. So any comments you want to make, any suggestions, Super Chat is the great way to do it. I don't really follow the chat, a little bit, but usually I try to avoid it. It is mostly a distraction for me, not for you. You guys participate. The more you chat, the more the algorithm likes the show. So do that. Also like the show, and of course, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to the show. What else did I want? Yeah, so we have targets, basically $250 an hour. So please take that into account as you listen and as you ask questions and support the show, make it possible. All right. So I think I think we all know. I mean, America is a constitutional republic, and so it's worth talking about for a little bit what that means. What it means to be a constitutional republic. The constitutional part of this is that it is a government whose power is limited by a constitution. A constitution limits the powers of government, what it can do, and it basically says it enumerates the things that government can do. And by doing so, everything else is excluded. It cannot do those things. In addition, in the United States case, there's a Bill of Rights, which articulates specific rights that the government cannot violate. Although there is the Ninth Amendment that says this is not an exhaustive list, and there are other rights, basically, with the notion derived from the Declaration that the purpose of the government is to protect individual rights of its citizens. Right? So that is the kind of the Constitution portion of it, and the Republican portion of it is, of course, that political authority comes from the people, exercised, though not directly, not directly through a democratic process, but exercises through elected representative. So there's not a direct rule of the majority, but even those, remember, those directly elected representatives are constrained, limited by the Constitution, what is written in the Constitution. So in a constitutional republic, you've got a written constitution, and that written constitution is the highest law. You have government officials cannot act beyond the powers that are granted to them explicitly in the Constitution. Individual rights are protected even against a popular majority, even against a democratic majority, call it what it is, and that laws and actions that violate the Constitution are invalid. And indeed, there's a mechanism to determine that, and in the case of the American Constitution, the existence of a Supreme Court, which has the authority to rule that certain actions and laws, even approved by the legislature and the executive, that they are unconstitutional. So constitutional republicanism in certainly the American system means that the government does not have unlimited authority. It does not have unlimited authority, and that doesn't matter whether what the government wants to do is supported by the majority or not. It doesn't matter whether the president who is elected in a landslide or not. What the government can do does not depend on the scope of what the government can do. Does not depend on how popular. It does not depend on the people. It depends on what is in the Constitution, and of course, constitutions can be changed, usually through supermajority. But unless the Constitution is changed, it is the governing law of the country. And as we said, the people elect representatives to make laws on their behalf within the constraints placed on them by the Constitution. Leaders are accountable and can be removed. You have no leader is above being removed. The mechanisms for removal are, of course, elections, impeachment, and impeachment. So elections are impeachment, and I guess for some functions, term limits. So citizens don't vote directly, and representatives cannot act. They cannot vote whatever they want. It has to be within the scope of what the Constitution allows. Other aspects that are common to a constitutional republic, and certainly present in the American constitutional republic, is a separation of powers. You've got three distinct entities, each with unique powers, and that there's minimal overlap, right? There's a legislative that writes the laws. There's an executive that executes on those laws and manages foreign policy. And there's a judiciary that makes sure that the legislature and the executives are functioning within the scope of the Constitution. Of course, that can also happen with the executive vetoing bills that the legislature sent to them. The legislature can also impeach an executive for his actions that might be in violation of the Constitution. So the idea is that each one has its own separate power, but they also constitute checks and balances against each other. No one of these entities has indefinite and unconstrained power. Each one of them is restraining the other, and it is to such an extent that the Constitution, particularly the American Constitution, works to make consensus really, really difficult. Is the fact that even the legislature split into two entities, and those two entities have to agree in order for legislation actually to get passed. So it's very difficult under the American system to actually get legislation passed. Intentionally so. Both, the House and the Senate have to agree. The president has to sign off on it, and the judiciary has to basically, it doesn't have to do anything, but if it's appealed to the judiciary, it has to rule that it's constitutional, which is in the powers of the legislature to do that. Other core features of a constitutional republic have rule of law. The government is subject to the same laws as citizens, and the government must function within the scope of the law. Within the scope of the law. And only within that scope. Right? That is, in that sense, the executive cannot just act, cannot make up law as it goes along. It has to function within that scope and only within that scope. All right, 1 second. I'm just looking at something here. Where am I? So we have a rule of law. The law is how we function, and nobody is above the law. Not the president, not ICE agents, nobody. Not secretaries of the government, not the military. Everybody's within the rule of law. Particularly in the American system, we have protected rights. We have actions that are clearly demarcated as protected: speech, religious expression, property, and the property due process. The government is limited in terms of what it can do to you. Search and seizure. It cannot just seize you. You have a right to your life. You have a right to act in this world. The government can only deal with you within the purview of the law and without violating your right. And finally, you have to have independent courts that enforce the law and the Constitution. So that is the basic idea of what a constitutional is. And a constitution is very limiting. It really provides, particularly, again, the American Constitution is very limiting. It really does provide for a government that is very restrained and very limited. The government, according to the American Constitution, can only exercise its enumerated powers, which are limited. The Constitution strictly limits what the state can do. And rights are, in a sense, above the law. They're the context in which the law is written. You cannot write a law that abrogates, that takes away the rights of individuals. You cannot override rights. They are the starting point. Now, the reality is that given this very constrained nature of government, and the way the Constitution is written, and the political philosophy that went into that Constitution, a political philosophy with an understanding of the role of individual, the role of the state as protecting that individual, the role of rights, the importance of rights, a clear, or at least relatively clear definition of what those rights were, what rights constitute. There has been, really from day one, post-Constitution, a tug between the desire of government and the officials in government and the people within government to expand their power, to grow their power, and this constitutional order that seeks to restrain it and to limit it. And there's constantly this pull, and sometimes it is constrained and sometimes it is not. And given that philosophy that was prevalent and understood by the founders when the country was created, and even then understood up to a point, not completely, not thoroughly, and this is why they could accept the existence of slavery. So not consistently, but given that that philosophy was going to erode because the intellectuals of the 19th century just couldn't keep up with it. They couldn't maintain it. It was challenged by philosophers in Germany and philosophers in England and in the UK, and the intellectuals couldn't hold on to the ideas of the Enlightenment, couldn't hold on to the explicit notions that were embedded in the Constitution, forgot what they even meant, or evaded what they even meant, kept going with the Constitution because it's the best we got, rather than a complete, full understanding of it, and slowly facilitated the erosion of the Constitution. Again, from day one, from probably the Whiskey Rebellion, and included the Adams what was it, the Alien and Sedition Act, and through the various expansions of government authority beyond the enumerated powers. The Constitution strictly limits what the state may do, and yet those were slowly eroded. Federal power expanded and expanded and expanded throughout the 19th century, slowly, very slowly during the 19th century. But in significant ways, you get railroads. Arguably, it's not clear that the Louisiana Purchase that Jefferson does, it's not at all clear that that is constitutional. Where in the Constitution does the government have the power to buy land? Now, to the credit of that generation, at least the land then was kind of provided to the people through various mechanisms to establish private property on it, and wasn't held by the state, as was done in the west of the Mississippi, where to this day, 75% of all the land is state land. Where in the Constitution does it say that the state can own land? There was broad interpretation of the Commerce Clause, the General Welfare Clause, the Necessary and Proper Clause, to justify then regulating railroads initially, and then everything ultimately, right, from labor and labor relations to healthcare and education and housing. Where in the Constitution does the state have authority, or any kind of authority, over education, or over housing, or over healthcare? And the Constitution has become a kind of a flexible framework that is adhered to when it seems popular to do so, or it seems that the political forces on the ascend would like to, at least in some areas, abide by the Constitution, and it's completely ignored where there is general belief in the population that it should be ignored. So while it's not done through sheer democracy, it is clearly done. So you could argue that today, we'll get to today in a minute. Today, we've got a real breakdown in our constitutional order, a breakdown that has been building for a long time. It's been eroding forever. But erosion is one thing, breaking is another. In the economic sphere, the constitutional order, for the most part, has broken, and was probably broken by FDR. Government intervention in the economy, and then his threat to pack the courts because the courts were opposing his economic policies, his threat to pack the courts, which resulted in the courts ultimately approving his various moves, which allowed federal government intervention in all these areas, for the most part, broke constitutional limitations on government control over our economy. Now, I think a lot of presidents and a lot of Congresses and the people have still felt some restraint in terms of what the government should and shouldn't do. There's generally, and again, that has changed over time and coming out of World War II, there was a sense in which the government should do more. And then with the failure, kind of the failed economy of the late 60s and the 1970s, there was a sense that the government should do less. But generally, there was an abandonment, really, of constitutional limitations on the government's authority to regulate, to tax, and to control. Remember, to get an income tax, the United States had to pass a constitutional amendment because the courts had ruled previously that income tax was unconstitutional. So with FDR's dramatic expansion of government intervention, government redistribution, you saw an erosion and a break, really, from the constitutional order when it came to economic issues. Social issues as well have kind of fluctuated. Certainly, the United States tolerated slavery for a long time as a kind of a right to life. Talk about a right to life. It violated that, and then after Reconstruction and the failure of Reconstruction, it reverted again to a very weak protection of the rights, the civil rights, the individual rights of blacks in the South, allowed for laws that were clearly discriminatory and that undid the idea of the rule of law. And, there have been periods in America that have been better on free speech and worse on free speech. And there have been periods in American history where there's been more respect for the rule of law, less respect for the rule of law. But in general, again, just like with economic rights, there seems to be some improvement, maybe during the 80s and 90s. There was some improvement over issues like free speech over the last 50 years, 60 years. There's certainly been improvements and steps backwards on the issue of civil rights, on the issue of discrimination based on sex and discrimination by the government based on race and sex and everything else. So really across the board, there's this like kind of tentative situation where you never know when the Constitution seems to matter and when it doesn't. There are certain periods, certain courts that care about certain parts of the Constitution and therefore try to enforce it. And there's certain periods and certain courts where they don't care anymore about those, they care about other ones. And there's this constant shift and constant move in terms of that aspect, and we'll return to the courts in a minute. But I would say that we stand right now at a point where really our constitutional order is at a breaking point. At a breaking point, and above and beyond anything else that I at least know from American history, at least since slavery was abolished. It really seems like the idea of separation of powers, the idea of checks and balances, is on the verge of going. The one area in which some constitutional issues matter is the courts, and we will see what the fate of the courts is going to be, but it's not obvious and it's not clear that the courts are going to survive. Clearly a separation of powers has eroded, and the executive branch has expanded over the last, since FDR. But we're now at a point where you really get a sense that Congress is not interested in doing its job. It is obsessed, I think more than ever, and again, historians might correct me, but it seems like more than ever, with the next election, with preservation of people's seats, and has no interest in actually governing, in passing laws, in holding the executive branch accountable, in doing its job in terms of checks and balances, or doing its job in terms of legislation with even a remote idea of individual rights at stake. It just seems non-existent. They can't pass a budget. They haven't passed a budget in years and years and years. They refuse to restrain the president. Indeed, over the last few decades, they have given more and more and more and more authority to the president and his regulatory agencies to run amok. There is some attempt by the courts to take away some of the power from the agencies. But it is a half-assed job in taking away their power. And it's certainly, the restraint on that power is not coming from the legislature. It's not being attempted by the legislature. More and more, Congress is delegating vast lawmaking authority to the president and to federal agencies. And we know from federal agencies, we know this for things like Dodd-Frank. Congress writes like a law that basically creates a framework, and then it tells the regulatory agencies, you fill in the blanks, you fill in all the details. And according to that, the agencies then write the regulations, they figure out how to enforce them, and they even have legal entities within the agencies to adjudicate violations internally without any checks and balances, without any, I guess some of those can be taken to Supreme Court, but with no involvement of Congress, no review of the laws, the regulations that they have written. But on top of that, Congress has basically shrugged off its responsibility for declaring war. It lets presidents engage in military action without any sanction by Congress, without any need for approval, without any votes. The Venezuela right now is a prime example of this, where actually a bill came to the floor to require congressional approval for more military action in Venezuela, and it got voted down. Now, you don't even need a bill like that. The Constitution clearly says that if Trump wants to engage in military action in Venezuela, he needs congressional approval. And the Senate can't even muster enough votes. Republicans who claim to be defenders of the Constitution can't even muster enough votes to do a reset, to return to a constitutional order that says, oh, next time we're not going to penalize you for last time. Next time you need to ask our permission. Nothing. They've delegated a power that, you could arguably say, or not arguably, that they have no authority to delegate. It's their responsibility, it's their power. They've done the same on a variety of different issues related to, for example, tariffs. The power to tariff, the power to tax, is explicitly in the Constitution. And that power to tariff lies with Congress, not with the president. It's allowed by the Constitution. It shouldn't be, but it's allowed by the Constitution. But it's allowed for Congress to do. But Congress, again, going back to the Great Depression, going back to FDR, and in that case, as a positive, it delegated the authority in many respects on tariffs to the executive, not on everything, with certain boundaries. That's why there's a chance that that about somewhere between 40% of the tariffs Trump passed will be ruled unconstitutional because they're outside the boundaries of what Congress delegated. But they delegated in the 1930s, they actually delegated the authority to the executives because they wanted tariffs reduced. They didn't have the balls, and maybe they didn't believe they had the votes to actually literally reduce the tariffs. So they gave the presidency the authority to reduce the tariffs that had previously been put on goods through Smoot-Hawley. So this was a way for them to weaken Smoot-Hawley. So Congress has given authority to the president to do tariffs, a lot of them, and to make them go up and make them go down. And it's reached an absurdity today, an absurdity. I don't know if you saw this, but today, Donald Trump announced that any country in Europe that sends troops to Greenland to bolster their defenses in the face of the supposed threat that Trump claims exists from China and Russia, any country that sends troops to Greenland, which he covets, Greenland that is, he will place a tariff of 10% on them. So in other words, any country that sends troops to Greenland, NATO country or other country that sends troops to Greenland, assume they're all NATO countries, Trump will tax American citizens on goods from those countries. Raise our taxes to penalize those countries for sending troops to a place that he claims needs more troops to defend itself. That's why he wants that place. I mean, just showing you the lie that Greenland is a national security issue. It has nothing, zero, nada, absolutely nothing to do with national security. Trump's desire for Greenland is purely an issue of his ego, his desire, his whim. And I know I'm reluctant to say this, given so many people out there declare that he is one of the greatest presidents in American history. Indeed, the very fact that Trump is going to take Greenland without asking Congress and has threatened to deploy troops to Greenland, and it's clear that he would do this without asking Congress. And then on top of that, he has no fear, zero, nada, nothing, that he will be impeached over it, because it is an impeachable offense. If he deploys troops to Greenland in order to occupy Greenland and take it over for the United States, that is an impeachable offense. That is basically a declaration of war on America's closest allies. Without congressional approval, without the checks and balances, without the legislature, which is responsible for declarations of war. The Constitution, in that sense, is breaking. The order is breaking. Congress won't do its job, and Trump just doesn't care about the Constitution. I mean, of all the presidents in American history, I think Trump knows the least about the Constitution and cares the least about the Constitution. He wants what he wants. The Constitution also, we will see, by the way, what happens when the Supreme Court rules. And let's be very clear, if the Supreme Court rules for Trump on the tariff case, then the Supreme Court is basically saying, yeah, the legislature doesn't matter and the Constitution doesn't matter. Because the whole point in the case is that Congress passed a law saying that the president could do X, Y, Z in times of economic emergency. The X, Y, Z do not include tariffs. Trump used that law to impose tariffs. And if the Supreme Court says, yeah, okay, then it doesn't matter what Congress writes in its laws. The president could do whatever he wants. And it doesn't matter what's written in the Constitution because the president could do what he wants. And indeed, again, that whole law that delegating the authority of the president to engage in economic, whatever, sanctions, this, that, and the other, during economic emergencies is absolutely 100% non-objective law. It's another delegation of powers that is an abrogation of Congress of their role. So this is a massive test for the Supreme Court. It really does seem like the Supreme Court is the only entity in American government right now that cares one iota about the Constitution. And the question is, how much? How much do they care? I worry about how much. I think this case was supposed to be decided before New Year's, was supposed to be decided a week and a half ago, was supposed to be decided on Wednesday, and they keep delaying and postponing, which worries me. It should worry you. This is one of the biggest cases, at least in, I think, probably the biggest case since Dobbs, where the court ruled badly. It's the biggest case in a long time, you know, in defining this relationship between the Constitution and the legislature and the executive. So we have a constitutional order, we have a constitutional republic in which Congress is dysfunctional, the legislature is dysfunctional, the executive is eager to take as much power as he can, and the executive right now is eager to do so like no other executive in history. I mean, FDR, as bad as he was restrained by a certain tradition of limited powers, ultimately got his way with the courts, but was far from just ignoring Congress and doing whatever he wanted. Since then, we've seen a slow erosion, particularly over the last few presidents. Bush wrote lots of executive orders. Obama wrote more executive orders. And now Trump is just out of control. Now, granted, FDR wrote lots of executive orders, but his starting point was a relatively free economy and world. So there much damage as he did, a somewhat functioning constitutional order. The constitutional order is so degraded, and now put on top of that, Trump, he's eviscerating it, completely eviscerating it. And you can see this in a number of different ways. I wonder what courts 100 years ago would have thought of the equity positions that the federal government is taking in American businesses to control those businesses, and the degree in which Trump is involving himself, the federal government, the executive branch, not the legislative, the executive branch, is involving itself in the running of American businesses. And the fact that, he basically takes equity positions, makes investments in businesses, forces through merger agreements to give the government a stake without any congressional approval, just because he wants to. There's no law has passed saying the American government has decided that it will, in order to facilitate XYZ, which would be false and anti-constitutional, but still would at least go through the right process, decided to take stakes in these companies, and we're delegating that authority to the federal government, to the executive to be able to do this. None of that. No, who cares? Who needs it? Authority? I just take it. Just do it. The other area, by the way, that is the responsibility of Congress, should be the responsibility of Congress, has been the responsibility of Congress, that has been delegated almost entirely, is immigration. I mean, Trump can ban immigrants from Muslim countries, or ban immigrants from these countries, and ban H-1Bs unless they pay $100,000, or ban this and ban that. Allow these, or the flip side of that, Biden can just declare oh yeah, we'll take 1 million asylum seekers. We don't care. Anybody who wants asylum can come into this country. We have no limitations. They're just winging it. They're just shooting from the hip. There's no strategy, no standard, no principle, no constitutional guide rails, no legislative guide rails. Congress is not involved. Congress doesn't care. They passed a law in 1965 about immigration that is barely relevant to today. Everything else is basically done by executive order. You know, we've got these dreamers who Obama did executive order to allow them a path to citizenship. Trump reversed it. The courts have kind of neither here nor there. And it's just a complete mess. But at this point, complete discretion of the executive branch, no rule of law, no separation of powers, no checks and balances. We don't have, in that sense, a constitutional republic. Maybe a republic, but if the legislature did its job, you could call it a republic, but the legislature is not doing its job. It's defaulting on its job. It's completely defaulting on its job. It is as if it didn't exist. And maybe, you know, maybe right now you're seeing one of the expressions of that, and that is the complete negation of the rule of law by the Department of Homeland Security. They just do whatever the hell they want. They detain citizens. They throw them in cells for days. Now, some of those citizens are going to sue, and there's a lawsuit brought by IJ representing some of these citizens that have been detained, and it'll go ultimately maybe to the Supreme Court, and maybe a year from now we'll find out what the Supreme Court thinks about that. But in the meantime, ICE doesn't care. They'll send, they'll send whoever they want, at least for a while, to El Salvadorian jails. They'll send some of them to South Sudan. They'll just treat people like cattle, like animals. They'll shoot U.S. citizens. They'll shoot U.S. citizens and kill them. Kill them. And what consequences? None. And you would think Congress would maybe talk about impeaching the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Noam, and would they impeach her? They should. She's not only is what she's doing horrific, but she's an idiot on top of all of that. I mean, she's clearly an imbecile. It's completely nuts. And it doesn't matter. They can get away with it. They keep going. Now the story is that Noam has said that from now on, everybody is going to be required to show an ID and prove that they are citizens. Now, this is clearly goes against the Constitution. This is clearly a violation of individual rights. This is clearly unprecedented in the history of law enforcement in the United States. Again, I'm sure there have been other examples of this violation, but at least in the modern times. And she's just declaring on TV, nonetheless, that this is a new policy and that citizens who refuse to show an ID proving that they are citizens will be detained. She's saying that's now legal. How did it become legal? Did Congress pass a law? I mean, even if they did, the law would be unconstitutional, but who cares? Because it will take a year, 2 years until the Supreme Court actually rules on it. And here the Supreme Court is unbelievably weak. Why isn't the Supreme Court going into emergency session and saying what's going on right now is unprecedented? The executive branch is taking on unbelievable powers that they do not have. We will review these powers in the next couple of weeks, and we will rule on these things. I don't know if there's ever been a precedent for that. I'm not an expert. But it strikes me that something like that, or one of these court cases, should be expedited, and the court should rule now. Because rights are being abused on scale all over the country. I got an email from a listener in Wilmar, Wilmar, Minnesota. I've been to Wilmar. It's a small town in way western Minnesota. It's 2.5 hour drive, 2 hours, 2.5 hour drives from Minneapolis. Due west, just go west, a little north and west, where ICE is harassing people. And the response, right? And this is not a big metropolitan area. This is not where hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are. And they're arresting. On Monday on the show, I'll read you some of the examples of what she sent me in terms of the harassment going on there. By what power? A border patrol, a border agency should be at the border, not in Wilmar, Minnesota. Now, Wilmar, Minnesota is not far from the Canadian border, I guess, but it's not border patrol. Customs, you do when people cross the border, not in Minneapolis, not in Chicago, not in Los Angeles, at the border. And yet, we have now unleashed a custom and border agency, and we've given them extra powers, powers that no police force in the United States has. They can demand to see your ID. And not only that, Noam has told us, they can arrest demonstrators, because the very sheer fact of demonstrating and filming is obstruction of law enforcement. No court has ever ruled that. Again, not constitutional, anti-constitutional. But who's going to stop it? Who is going to stop them? And if they don't get stopped, what's next? Right? We've seen the slippery slope since the late 19th century of bad Supreme Court decisions and an ever-growing federal government and a growing power. We saw the establishment of the antitrust laws in the 1890s. We saw the establishment of the Federal Reserve and the income tax under Wilson in 1914. We saw FDR impose kind of regulatory regimes on the economy that were unheard of, and redistribution of wealth, the creation of the biggest pyramid scheme in history called Social Security, and a massive federal regulation on a scope unthought of in American history of the financial system by the feds in 1933 and 34. And it just gets worse and worse and worse over time. Once in a while, we get a legislature that's a little bit more friendly to market, so they deregulate it a little bit, not too much. But it all bounces back because there's no basis for the deregulation, and certainly no constitutional one. And we've seen this slippery slope, down, away from constitutional republicanism. We go, and we're about to reach the bottom. And what does the bottom mean? It really means the legislature's insignificant, unimportant. The Supreme Court and the court system are just there to confirm the actions of the executive. And the bottom is the executive rules. Basically, the executive does what he wants. The executive is in charge. And there is no questioning his authority. If you want to see the bottom, as it will happen in the United States if unchecked, it's Putin in Russia. A softer version of that, a more moderate version of that, is Orban in Hungary. But the ultimate is Putin in Russia. It started off you know, in when he was first elected as, yeah, there were, I mean, there wasn't a constitutional order, but there was some semblance of freedom. And eroded. Now, it happened very fast there because there's no constitutional republic. But it's happening here because our constitutional republicanism is so eroded, so become irrelevant, that we are now on the verge of it going away and disappearing, and the American form of government basically being a feature of history. ICE has no legitimate power, certainly away from the border. It has no legitimate power. If people in Minneapolis are here illegally because they don't have the right docs, or working illegally because they don't have work permits are constitutional? Requiring one? I don't know, but okay. Then that's a law enforcement issue. And law enforcement should deal with it. And if local law enforcement doesn't deal with it, then it's the problem of local law enforcement. It's the problem of the local people. And if the local people want to change it, they can vote out the governor and bring in another governor, and they can then impose the laws or enforce the laws. Or maybe the FBI needs to be sent in if it's a real crisis. But there's just no role for ICE inside the United States. Nothing, nada, zero. It is an illegitimate agency functioning in illegitimate ways. It is not protecting individual rights. It's not protecting American national security. It's not protecting anything. It is an above-the-law monstrosity. And that's the sense in which I believe it should be opposed. Given what's at stake, yes, civil disobedience is the answer. The American people, because Congress won't do it, and the courts don't seem to be willing to do it, we have no choice. The Constitution is gone, or at least deferred. By the time this reaches the Supreme Court, will be a year or two, right? The American people need to assert their sovereignty, need to assert their views. And that can only be done through civil disobedience. I mean, the photos I see coming out of all these places around the country, armed thugs in groups, masked, with unmarked cars, walking around neighborhoods, intimidating the population. That's not America. That's Russia. That's not America. Remember, the sovereignty of the governed comes from the individual. We are sovereign as individuals. A government that stops respecting the rights of its citizens is a government that loses its sovereignty. And an agency created by government to ignore our rights, to violate our rights, in explicit, a contradiction to the Constitution, is not an entity. It's not an entity that needs to be respected or should be respected in any respect. It should be opposed. It should be opposed. And what a civil disobedience means? It means that you obstruct them without using violence, knowing that you'll probably get arrested and sit in jail. But if enough of us do it, if the number of people who do it is large enough, then they can arrest everybody. And if there's enough pressure, then maybe they will change their ways. The alternative, of course, is they become a lot more violent. So Yeah, I mean, I think we're on the verge, right? I mean, I'm going to be interested to see how the Supreme Court rules on tariffs, and what Trump does in response. I'm going to be interested to see how this issue with ICE evolves, and whether Congress will do anything. But I think we're very much on the precipice that the constitutional order in the United States, the idea of constitutional federalism, is dead. It's not just eroded and imperfect and problematic, but it's dead. Maybe at some fringes, on some issues of property rights, on some issues of other things, you can still appeal to the Constitution. But on the big stuff, it's dead. And again, it'll depend a lot on whether the Supreme Court is willing to uphold the Constitution in clear-cut cases, and whether the administration will then abide by the Supreme Court. And if they don't, which I hope doesn't happen, but if they don't, what happens? What happens? Does anything happen? Is there anybody, any entity in the American system of government that can act at that point? So we are at the conclusion of that slippery slope. We're very close to the bottom. And as I warned when Trump was elected, Trump could easily bring us to that bottom. Not because he has an ideology, not because he's a fascist, a communist, or whatever, but because he's just a whim worshipper who enjoys power and enjoys shocking people and just enjoys doing whatever the hell he wants to do. Because, again, Trump's not ideological, but he doesn't believe in the Constitution. He believes in authoritarianism. That's why he admires Putin and Xi and the rest of them. And why he hates Europe. He despises Europe. I mean, if he treated Putin like he treats Europe, Ukraine would have won the war by now. He hates Europe. Why? Because it's free. Because, relatively, there's actually rule of law, and people vote, and political parties jockey, and they're not constitutional republics, but they're limited democracies with limitation on what that they can vote. But they function as free societies, relatively free societies, and that he doesn't like. He doesn't believe in. He believes in authoritarianism. He wants illegal immigrants out because he promised that to his voters. Then they need to get out, whatever the means. The end justifies the means. He wants Greenland. Who's Congress or the courts to get in his way? He wants to impose tariffs. He loves tariffs. He keeps unpopular tariffs hugely unpopular in America today. All the polls show this. He doesn't care. He likes tariffs. He said it's his favorite word in the English language. So he's going to impose them. To have power given to Congress? Who cares? He's just going to do it. And this is what's going to happen. If the courts strike down these particular tariffs, he'll use another law and reimpose all the tariffs using a different law. And then it'll go back to the courts. Does he have the constitutional power to use that law to do it? And maybe a year from now, they'll strike that down and they'll find another law. He is not going to abide by it. Not its spirit. He'll abide by the letter maybe, but not the spirit of it. And there's really very little we can do at this point, other than, stand up and make our voices heard. And, I don't know how you could penalize Trump. I mean, maybe vote against the Republicans in the midterm election, which is not a great outcome, but I'm not even sure he'll pay attention to that. I mean, that'll be the next big test. Are we a republic anymore? We're not a constitutional republic anymore. Are we even a republic? Are elections even matter anymore? Clearly, his behavior after the 2020 election suggests that he doesn't believe we should be. He is uninterested in elections. He's uninterested in being a republic. He's uninterested in the rule of law. And in all of those senses, you know, I really do think he is the worst president in American history. Not the best, the worst. And that doesn't preclude that he might do some stuff that we approve of once in a while, by accident almost. All right. And by the way, here's another one. I just, you know, it's another example of just completely ignoring the rule of law. Just it doesn't matter anymore. The Department of Justice is reportedly investigating elected officials for criticizing the administration's immigration enforcement operation. They're supposedly investigating Waltz and the mayor of Minneapolis for criticizing ICE. Now, I'm reading this from kind of a press release from FIRE. This is an organization that protects freedom of speech. They write, if this is the basis for the investigation, it is blatantly unconstitutional and intolerable in a free society. The right to condemn government action without fear of government punishment is the foundation of the First Amendment. Now, I don't know if that's the foundation, but it is a foundation. This would be the first time the administration has used boundless, imaginary definitions of obstruction or incitement that have no basis in the law and run headlong into constitutional limits. The few exceptions to the First Amendment are defined by narrow, exacting standards for a reason: to prevent the government from wielding its power to squash dissent. If criticism of government policy can be rebranded as a crime, then constitutional protections become meaningless and the government becomes unaccountable. That is precisely the danger the First Amendment is meant to prevent. And it is a line no administration may cross. But this administration is willing to cross it. This administration is willing to test that boundary. This administration is willing to push and try. Why? Because he's the greatest American president in American history, right? Because he can do no wrong, even according to people who claim to share some of our values. It just is. It's just another example of how monstrous this administration is, and what they're trying to do. Yep. All right. So I know that's depressing. Sorry, Saturday. What can I do? I was thinking, what could I do as a positive? But there are too many bad things going on right now to do a positive show. Because the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I'll do this briefly, more briefly than I expected to. I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of Iran and why we're where we are right now, but I won't. I'll leave that to a future show. I just want to talk about what I think is going on right now. And by the way, just as an aside, you guys should all read Trump's post on Greenland that he published this morning, I think, about the tariff he's going to impose on countries like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, and Finland to penalize them for sending troops to Greenland. A tariff that will start at 10% will increase to 25% on June 1st, 2026. Of course, he pretends that it's them, and he pretends that they pay for it. We will pay for that tariff. He pretends that there's a national security reason. It's required for the what do you call it, the Golden Dome. But NATO would allow any installations there that are required for the Golden Dome. There's no requirement that we actually own Greenland to put a base there with an anti-missile technology of the Golden Dome. It is a complete myth. Same is true in Canada. You could post them in Canada. And indeed, if we don't use our allies' territory as part of the Golden Dome to protect America, then the Golden Dome is not going to be very effective. And if we don't have any allies by the time Donald Trump is finished, then it's going to be very difficult to defend America. I want to point out just a few things about Iran, which quickly, and then I need to do this review, and then I'll go to your questions. And there are a lot of questions, and you guys have been very, very generous today, so I very much appreciate that. And so I need to cover all that. So today's show is going to go long, but I can't have it go too long because the dinner reservation's out there at some point. All right. So Iran, I just want to mention these few things. One, demonstrations are continuing. There is evidence coming out of Iran that the demonstrations are continuing, that in spite of the fact that by most accounts that I've seen, the Iranian regime has killed anywhere between 12 to 20,000 of its own civilians. This is a massacre of the civilian population. I've even seen reports which I hesitate to talk about because I haven't seen confirmation, but I've seen a number of different places. I don't know if this is true, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was true, that they actually used chemical weapons, chemicals on some of the demonstrators. But they killed them in mass, and there are people out there, again, I have no way of verifying this, there are people out there claiming the 20,000 number is low. So this is happening. Remember, Trump said, go out the streets, protest. I will, help is coming. No help is coming. Trump had the airplanes in the air to go after the Iranians and withdrew them. And then he said, they promised not to execute. And indeed, on Wednesday, they didn't execute the guy that they said they were going to execute. But over this weekend, yesterday and today, that's the weekend in Iran, yesterday and today, the mullahs have come out and said, no, we intend to execute everybody. Indeed, expect 800 people at least in the near future to be executed. 800 people. Khomeini also said, and this is a strategic mistake he made, but not surprising, he's another authoritarian, not very smart authoritarian. But who knows? He said, Trump is responsible for all the people who died in Iran. It's Trump's fault. That'll piss off Trump, so he might do something. Demonstrations are continuing. The killings are continuing. The executions will continue. And Trump is sitting on his hands. Trump is sitting on his hands. Now, he did say this morning, Trump did, that he's calling for an end to Ali Khamenei's reign in Iran. He said it's time to look to new leadership in Iran. What does that mean? How does that come about? Just replace the supreme leader? Maybe his son could do a better job? Trump said that the rulers rely on repression and violence to govern. After reading the hostile ex-post by Supreme Leader who called Trump a criminal and accused him of inciting sedition in Iran, Trump said, what he is guilty of as a leader of a country is the complete destruction of the country and the use of violence at levels never seen before. You might want to read about Nazi Germany. In order to keep the country functioning, even though that function is very low level, the leadership should focus on running his country properly, like I do with the United States, and not killing people by the thousands in order to get control. Leadership is about respect, not fear and death. The man is a sick man who should run his country properly and stop killing people. Yes, but he can't because he's an authoritarian thug. What is Trump going to do? He's promised that help is on the way. In the meantime, people are in the streets. Even today. Even after they know the scale of the killing. I mean, just imagine, the scale, the degree of courage that you need to go into streets knowing you will be shot at, knowing you are unarmed. So we will see, and in this respect, there is a sense in which it's Trump's fault. In which, and I know some of you will object to this because, TDS or whatever. But there is a real respect in which this is Trump's fault. Earlier in 2025, Israel had the Iranian regime in an unbelievable defensive posture. The reality is the Mossad had, killed many of Iran's leadership, primarily in the military. The pride of the Iranian regime, the nuclear program, had been destroyed. The missile program was weakened dramatically. I mean, the Ayatollah was on the ropes. He barely survived. Barely survived. And Israel had the agents in place. It was about to launch additional airstrikes against regime facilities. And at any time, Israel or the United States could have killed Ayatollah Khamenei. The United States did come in and bomb the nuclear program. Probably more symbolic than anything else. And the regime was on the verge of being, well, maybe not collapsing, but being so weakened that the Iranian people could have finished the job. Instead, Trump, really at the behest of the Qataris, forced Netanyahu to bring the planes home, forced Israel into a ceasefire, forced them to stop, when again, another week or so, they could have completely destroyed the Iranian regime. And think about what would be happening right now with the demonstrations if that had happened. But he wanted to be a peacemaker. He wanted to be a ceasefire maker. He wants a Nobel Prize. He wants to be respected for his bringing peace to the world or whatever. And what he did was handing the Ayatollah a lifeline that allowed the Ayatollah and the regime to regroup, to jail and kill spies, and to regain control so that now they can kill their own people en masse without any retribution. There's a long history. There's a long lesson one should learn from history. Bad guys don't quit. They don't go away. They don't moderate. They get emboldened by your weakness. They get emboldened when you don't kill them. They get emboldened when they're not crushed. And at the earliest opportunity, they will pounce. They will destroy. And Trump had it so close, and it wouldn't require the U.S. to do anything other than to give Israel a green light. And he balked, all in the name of some crazy idea of a ceasefire and peace and whatever, 3,000 years, Middle East, whatever nonsense that he has rolling around in his head. And the Iranian people are now, paying the price. Paying the price. Thousands and thousands of deaths. And again, I just want to remind everybody, and this is worth just remembering, particularly when we look at the kind of the challenges that we face as a country. Think of how courageous and brave the Iranians going out in the streets are. I want you to remember that. And when you see the bodies of the people killed, so many of them are young. young men and women in their teens, in their 20s, in their 30s. This is the young generation is being eviscerated by the Iranian regime. And yet they keep going out, and their parents keep going out. And it's heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. All right. Finally, I owe a book review, I guess, to Larry Radtke, Radtke. And the book is Forks in the Road. It's a book of short stories, and I reviewed it. I don't know, a few months ago. Reviewed the first few stories, and I left one story I hadn't reviewed yet, and I said I would, and now's the day. So I'm going to review it today. Do a quick review of it. You can get Forks in the Road. I don't even know what it costs, but it's. I think you can, in the Kindle, you can pretty much get it for free. It maybe cost a minimum amount, but it's available on Amazon. Forks in the Road. And again, Larry, Radtke, right? And I put one second. Let me just bring it up in. All right, no, that's a different Forks in the Road. The problem is there's more Forks in the Road. There's more than one Forks in the Road. So you got to find the right Forks in the Road. So let's put his family name, Radtke. And there it is. And you can get the Kindle for free, basically. You can get a paperback for $5.50, and it is available. So the final story in the short story is called The Spirit of the Marsh. And one thing that's characteristic of all the short stories in the book, there are 4 short stories in the book. And one thing that's characteristic of all the short stories is the stories are super original. And God, I don't know where people like Larry, where they find the imagination to come up with these stories. But the stories are really imaginative and original. So I give him a lot of credit for that, for coming up with just original stories. The Spirit of a Marsh, has elements of kind of, not objectivism, I wouldn't say, but respect for science and a respect for property rights and kind of a standing up against eminent domain. Although there are no speeches, there's no long paragraphs of articulation of philosophical, which I like. I don't like, unless you're Ayn Rand, I generally don't like books that try to preach outside of the story, where you get speeches and long articulations of philosophical points. It's a story about property that's being taken over through eminent domain by a company, and it's a story about a scientist who uses the animal world to get revenge against the people who are taking her family's land through eminent domain. It's a bit of a thriller. There's a attempted murder, and there's no real fight scenes, but the revenge of nature is pretty violent. But it's all guided by a human hand and human technology. I think it's a little science fiction in that sense. The technology doesn't exist, the technology they're talking about, but it's good. There's an element of it that, so all of that is I liked, and it's fun. It's a fun story. But I'm going to be critical. So sorry, Larry. Larry paid me a lot of money to be critical, I guess. A few things that I would say I would critique about the story. The story just logically has certain gaps that I'm not going to get into because, again, I don't want to give away the story. Not everything is explained. When it is explained, it's often explained after the fact in kind of a rushed way. It goes by too fast. A lot is happening and it goes by too fast. But I think the main thing I didn't like was that the protagonist, the hero, really, he's principled, and you could argue strong at the beginning of the story, and principled and strong at the end of the story, but he's very weak through most of the story. He's weak, and he doesn't drive the plot. Like, I like heroes who drive the plot. It's them who are making things happen and determining things and moving the things along. And he really isn't. It's either he's falling for stuff, but it's other forces, and the forces are not always clear what's driving it, because it's not clear if, I mean, there's a fog that plays into this, and it's not clear where the fog how it can do what it does. It's probably guided by some tech that a certain woman has, and maybe she's driving the plot, but it's not clear, and there's ambiguity about it. But one thing is clear: he, the protagonist, the hero, is not driving the plot. He's not in charge. He's not. His decisions are not what make a difference, except his initial decision, and right at the end. And indeed, he's weak and kind of pathetic during most of it. So I just didn't like him. He was not a person I could relate to, and he didn't strike me as a heroic person. And if anything, he struck me as out of character when he became more principled. So I think that was my main, negative point about it. The story is, a little out there in a sense of the science fiction elements, but justice is done. I'll say that. So it's always good to have a story where the bad guys don't succeed or meet an appropriate end, put it that way. Again, some of the storytelling feels a little rushed, like the details feel a little rushed, and there might be some plot holes in it that I don't quite get. But yeah, it's definitely entertaining and enjoyable, and again, a very original plot. Just the arc of it. I've never read anything like it, and never seen anything like it. It could be a movie. I could see it being turned into a movie. It's got a strong visual element to it. And Bonnie says, Folks in the Road is Folks with an S at the end. And you have to put the name of the author into it in order to get the right book. She says it's only $2.99. I have some kind of Kindle Unlimited, and I get it for free. All right, so that's right. It's part of the Kindle Unlimited. I get it for free, but you can get it for $2.99 if you buy it. And what do you call it? I found, again, the four stories. They're all original. I actually, funnily enough, I kind of enjoyed the first two more than I enjoyed the latter two. But I think they're all original, all interesting. And yeah, check out Larry's writing. I think I'll see Larry in Florida at the conference in where is the conference? Not in Venice. What's it called? I forget the name. I forget the name of the name of the town where the conference is held, but it's the RandCon. Rand's birthday. We're going to be celebrating Rand's birthday. Yeah, it's Larry Radtke, Radtke. So check him out. Check out the book. And all right, where am I? I think that's it. I think I covered the material I wanted to cover, an hour and a half. And I now will turn to your Super Chat questions. And there are a lot of them, so thank you. Also, a lot of stickers and some substantial ones. So I've got a lot of thank yous to do here. Wes, well, before Wes, I think we've got Rand Coley. Rand Coley, thank you for the $50. Rand knows Wilmar, I'm pretty sure. Wilmar, Michigan, and Minnesota. Wilmar, Minnesota. John Bobbin, thank you. Really appreciate that. And I need to get back to you on your email, and I will. I apologize. Free Market Capital, thank you. and Troy. Troy came in with the 500 Australian dollars. Thank you, Troy. That is just amazing. I really, really appreciate all the support you provide to the Yaron Brook Show. Thank you, Asiv97. I appreciate it. And let's see, who else do we have? We have Stephen Hopper. Thank you. All right, we got to there. Let's go backwards. Stephen Hopper. There's Troy. Thank you again. I'm just going through, and John and Rand. All right, cool. Thank you guys for the stickers. Really appreciate it. It's a great way to support the show. You don't have to ask a question. You can just do a sticker and that's it. And it's a value for value. It's fantastic. All right. So thank you all. We also got some terrific support on the Super Chat with a number of kind of $50 Australian dollar, American dollar pledges, contributions. So thank you for that. And so let's just go through the Super Chats. Let's go with it. All right. Not Your Average Algorithm, $100. Thank you. He says, many people love Rand's novels while never comprehending the philosophy. But millions of people now live more productive, more ambitious, more happy lives. Yes, I think all that's true. That sense of life is not going to grow. Even if people don't understand that sense of life is only going to grow. Even if people don't understand these ideas on an intellectual level. I mean, maybe. But I don't know if their ambition ultimately translates into a sense of life. And I really don't see any evidence of this sense of life and its growth. I see people being productive and being more ambitious and creating wealth and doing things like that, maybe because they read Ayn Rand. But I don't see them being upset at the ever-growing encroachment of government into our lives and into our neighborhoods. I don't see enough people upset. I don't see that sense of life that Americans used to have before Objectivism, of don't tread on me, of it's my life, it's my values, it's my choices. That attitude seems to have, and now I hope that people reading Ayn Rand will slowly bring that back. But sense of life is something that is really, a sense of life is something that's created in childhood, in maybe young adulthood. And all indications are that by the time they read Ayn Rand, and maybe this is why they don't comprehend the philosophy, their sense of life is already rotted away. And while the philosophy the novels might appeal to some spark, remnant of their sense of life that still exists in them, and that might spark them to behave and to do certain things that are positive, I don't know how comprehensive it is. I don't know how deep it goes and how much it actually changes them without grasping the philosophy. And of course, our educational system does all in its power to make sure that by the time you become an adult, you don't have the tools, i.e. a mind, to be able to grasp the philosophy. So, I mean, I hope you're right. I very much hope you're right. If there is a chance for this culture, if there's a chance for this world, for this generation, for the next two generations, it is in the novels of Ayn Rand. It is in the hope that it is imprinting a sense of life in Ayn Rand, in the readers. I wait to see the evidence of that. And I think the challenge that Trump is throwing at us right now with ICE is the big challenge, because I don't know. He might retreat because what he's doing is very unpopular, which is good. It's very unpopular. And polls are not good. And he might choose to strategically or tactically retreat, to engage another time in another place. Or he might choose to escalate. And if he chooses to escalate, what do the American people do? Not just in Minneapolis, which tends to be a pretty leftist place, and where a lot of the people, some of the people at least, out there in the streets are motivated probably by the wrong things. What happens when this it happens in other places? I mean, I'm happy to see. Well, anyway, what happens when it happens in other places? How do the American people respond? How does the what happens? That's going to be a big test. A big test. I'm also happy to see the billionaires leaving California, not because it hurts California, but because it says that there are billionaires out there willing to acknowledge their selfishness, at least in this one realm. There's only so much confiscation they're willing to tolerate. And maybe that's a little bit of Ayn Rand influence. Because not all the billionaires are doing that. Shazbat, and I quote, this is from Andor, from Ghorman in Andor. Quote, "If you can hear me, the imperial slaughter of Ghorman has begun. Thousands are dying. Help us. Is there no one who can help us?" Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Andor, but it's pretty powerful, and the slaughter happens, and it's on a massive scale, and there is no one to help them, or the people to help them. It's really too little, too late. There's not enough. But right now, the United States is in a great position to help the Iranian people. And it's promised to help the Iranian people. Will it live up to the promise? I don't know. I just don't know. All right, Michael. Both sides are held together not by ideas, not by any understanding of political philosophy, but their hatred of the other tribe. There can be no victory in a blind struggle of that kind, only fear, distrust, and transient regional warlords. Yeah, it's not completely idea-less. The problem is the ideas that they do hold. The ideas that are rising on the right, that are slowly dominating the right, are the ideas of nationalism. Mingled with Christianity, mingled with religion. It's a Christian nationalism. But nationalism, this heritage Americans, that America's blood and soil. So the ideas on the right are the ideas of nationalism. The ideas on the left are the ideas of the far left, which is the only part of the left that really has ideas. It's the ideas of disintegration, the ideas of postmodernism, the ideas of fragmentation. And there is some center that believes in America as they believe it was a few decades ago. It doesn't quite understand what America is, core founding, and the moral principles behind it, but has some notion of they'd like to return to normalcy. They view normalcy as America vis-a-vis, I don't know, the 1990s or the early 2000s, before 9/11. So it's not completely empty of ideas, and the question is, what wins out if there is a war of ideas? That is, what wins out? Is it the evil integration of religion and nationalism, or is it the disintegration of woke and post-colonial theory and all this garbage? It's in America that it's not. I think that the winner is the national conservative, the national Christian nationalists, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen quickly. And I agree with you that in the process, we're going to have a lot of fear and destruction. A lot of fear and destruction. Whether it devolves into civil war, I don't think so, but I don't know. Have you, this is Rez, thank you, Rez, for $50 Australian. Have you seen the videos posted by DHS themselves mocking the deported? One had the Pokemon theme with footage of arrests. Another had a remix of Jet 2 holiday music. This is fun to them, and they're little fascist supporters. And the little fascist supporters love it, he says. Unbelievable. You know, I haven't seen it. I should go back and see, I should look for it, and I want to see it. But yes, I agree with you completely. They relish this. They enjoy it. I think they relish the murder of good. They celebrate it. By the way, for those of you still in doubt, the New York Times just did, I think they published it this morning, a frame-by-frame analysis of all the videos, including the video that the ICE agent took from the front of the car. That is the one he took on his cell phone. It wasn't a video cam, a cam on him. It was a cell phone. He was busy filming, and while all this was going on, and frame by frame, and it shows that he wasn't hit. If he was, maybe his arm was hit a little bit. He wasn't hit, and that by the time he shoots, he's way out of danger. Even the first shot, never mind the second and third shots. So I encourage you to watch that. But they like this. They shot somebody. Now everybody is really intimidated. And they're all about flexing muscles for intimidation's purposes. Rez also writes, I've always thought conservatives have tended towards authoritarianism. They have, when they say law and order, they mean blind obedience to laws and institutions who are legitimate, because they are the law and institutions, and you'd better comply or else. Yeah, now it's becoming really reality. You're seeing, I keep getting people commenting on my videos on ICE. Well, if you just do what they say, nothing will happen to you. Yeah, but I don't want to do what they say, and they have no right to say what they say. Somebody was saying, I don't get ever thrown down onto the ground by the authorities, because I just get out of the car when they tell me to get out of the car, and I go down on the ground by myself if they ask me to. Yeah. So you're a little slave who does what you are told and just follows orders. Follows orders. Conservatives are supposed to be the ones who conserve the Constitution. They're supposed to be the ones conserving the American form of government. They're supposed to be the ones conserving the rule of law. But that's exactly what they're not doing. Because they've separated law as something coming down from the authorities, from a constitution, from a moral authority, even from a political authority. Because the laws coming down from the ICE agent have no political authority. They're anti-constitutional. They're not an entity that has policing power over me, over you. So yes, conservatives are way too follow the laws because they're the laws, because we said so. Not because they're there to protect individual rights, not because they're there for a particular purpose and particular meaning. And when they lose their meaning, well, maybe we should question those laws, challenge those laws. But, conservatives would not have fought against slavery. They would not have fought against Jim Crow laws, and they didn't. They would have not objected to the many irrational, illegitimate, horrific laws that existed in this country over the years. They would have changed nothing. Andrew, one can have times of strong resistance to focus, but focus is still a choice. One can wrangle one's focus to get it working right, refuse to give in to starting blankly, and look for the light. Any thoughts on will and focus? Yeah, absolutely. Look, how many times are there that you have something you know you need to do, and you don't feel like it? I mean, seriously, don't feel like it. You don't want to do it. The beach is beckoning, the book you're reading is beckoning, TV is beckoning, whatever, something else is beckoning, or a different project is beckoning. But this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you've decided previously to do. And this is the right thing to do. And at that point, you have to muster your will. You have to bring your focus forward. You have to say, okay, in spite of all that, I'm going to do it. And that's the difference between whim worshippers who don't get anything done, who procrastinate, who really don't get anything done, who are not productive, and the productive people in our world. The productive people in our world do it. They don't do it as a sense of duty. They do it because that is the choice that they made, but they don't let their particular specific emotional state or their particular specific distractions keep them from doing what they know is right. They get it done. And and you can notice it in yourself. I don't feel like doing it, but I'm going to do it. And you bring that energy, you bring the focus, you bring the mental concentration, and you do whatever it is that you want to do, that you need to do. Michael, we are now at the point where the administration is talking openly about requiring you to carry proof of citizenship at all times and to show it to government agents on demand. We are at the borderline of dictatorship. Well, I don't know if that is the borderline of dictatorship, but certainly we are just another big step towards authoritarianism. No question about that. And that requirement is again goes against the Constitution. It looks like, according to Nome, they're going to require it. And then the question is, what then? And how do we resist it? And how do we stop it? And how do we prevent it from happening? But they are intent on pushing the boundaries of the law as much as they can, and then saying, sue us. That's the attitude. Sue us. Knowing that it won't reach the Supreme Court for a year or two. Clark, I've toured Auschwitz. To think the ideology that led to its creation is gaining in popularity is astounding. Such wickedness and cruelty are beyond my comprehension. Yeah, I mean, you look at how many people today are sympathetic to the Nazis, are Nazi apologists, are only asking questions about the Nazis, something that even 5 years ago would have been unthinkable. If you think about the Tucker Carlsons of the world and all the other influences in that universe who are, I mean, I think the number 2 lawyer in ICE right now is based, I think, in Texas, is an avowed neo-Nazi. He's posted on it. He's no questions about it. He was, I guess, put on probation for a while, and he's back. He's back prosecuting cases for ICE. A Nazi. The tolerance for Nazis is just unbelievable at this point among Republicans. It's just unthinkable. Clark. ICE is a paramilitary group operating within the executive branch, answerable to the president. The essence of ICE is that it is designed to be arbitrary, uncontrolled power. What's stopping it from morphing into the Gestapo? Well, what's stopping it is the fact that Trump and the people around him are still somewhat tentative about throwing out the Constitution completely. They still worry about the courts a little bit. They still are not ready to take that next step, which is to just ignore the courts. Maybe they will soon. I mean, Elon Musk wants to literally prosecute judges who are anti-Trump. They're not quite ready yet to take that next step. I don't know when they will be, and a lot of it depends on how we, the people, respond to what is happening now. The more we acquiesce, the more we stay silent, the more we just don't really care about ICE, the more power ICE will gain, and the more the administration will start thinking about how to use it in other ways and how it can become Gestapo-like. But there's no... The only thing limiting them right now is an unwillingness to ignore the court system completely. Push it at the edges, but not ignore it completely. But I don't know how long that'll last. The more confident they get, the more they'll be willing to ignore it. Rue, some are claiming that Trump is thinking about the future of AI and the US and China in a race and he fears that we don't act outside of the U.S. in countries like Venezuela, Greenland, and Canada, they'll lose to China. We'll lose to China. I don't know how all of that is related to AI. I mean, clearly there is a competitive nature to the United States and China's relationship. There is hostility there. I don't see how that's related to Greenland and Canada and Venezuela. I mean, what the United States needs to do. Alex Epstein has a video interview with a young entrepreneur in the military technology space, which is very good. I encourage you to watch it. And basically, I agree with the kid. He says, look, what we need is we need to embrace modern technology and modern warfare. And to do that, that's what we need. To beat China, we can. But we need to be investing in that. And it's not hugely expensive, but we need to focus our energies on drones and electronic warfare and the ability to shoot down ballistic missiles, even hypersonic. We need a really focused effort around the essentials of winning a war against China. Greenland is not necessary for that. Venezuela has no relevance for that. What we need to do is build a preemptive force that China would not dare to challenge. And it's possible for the United States to do it. We can innovate at a speed China can't keep up with, even though it has much larger population, more engineers, more scientists, because they don't have the freedom. But we need to do it, and that is the Defense Department needs to be focused on it, which I don't think it is. Instead, it's focused on kidnapping, or what's a better word than kidnapping, so it doesn't seem so negative. Deposing, arresting Maduro. I mean, good, but is that really? I mean, it's nice that they showed the Chinese that we can evade their radar. Maybe it's better that we didn't show them that, so that when we need to, we can actually do it and surprise them. Now they know. Now they can tinker. Now they can improve. The U.S. can beat China if it focuses immediately on the right things. And I don't think a Defense Department or Department of War headed by Hegseth has the intellectual capacity to do that. Ali Musa says, we lost Iran because of Trump and his weakness. I agree. Now, I don't think we've lost yet, and Trump might still act. He might still act, and Khomeini blaming the massacre on Trump might instigate Trump acting. It's exactly the kind of triggers that might get him to be impulsive and do something. So he might still do it. But yes, the loss of life is a consequence of Trump's weakness. Again, if Israel had just continued for another week or two, this regime would have just toppled. Never mind if the United States had entered and joined Israel and helped it, then, yeah, regime would have been lost a long time ago. Ali Musa says, Ben Shapiro is one of these people who asking for shadow banning along with Eric. Now, I don't understand. Ben Shapiro is one of these people who asking for shadow banning along with Eric. I'm not sure which Eric you mean. Now they are in power. It is all the free speech until they take power. Oh, all forced free speech until they take power. They are pathetic. Okay, so they were arguing for free speech, and now that they've got power, to hell with that. Yep, that's the nature of authoritarians. And this group with Trump, behind Trump, supporting Trump, enabling, this is the key word, enabling Trump, is not interested in free speech. They're not interested. And they're all enabling Trump. And Ben Shapiro is a Trump enabler. And I think what he's doing is horrific. Clark, if you did members-only shows every Sunday, it would grow your revenue substantially. Maybe make every Sunday an OPAR show. I don't know, because the members-only show don't generate a lot of revenue. So I don't know if it would. And look, I can't do every Sunday. That would mean I'm doing 7 days a week. Some days, like Monday, 2 shows a day. Even I need a day of rest. The Sabbath has significance. And as it is, if I do OPAR twice, 2 Sundays, and I do a members only show on one Sunday, then I'm already doing 3 out of 4 Sundays. So yeah, it's too much. It's too much. We have to find other ways to increase my revenue. Like numbers. The way to do it is for you to share the show, like the show, get the show out there, get exposure to the show, particularly the shorter videos. Share them. The more people see them, the algorithm will share them a little bit, but the algorithm is going to be limited because I'm too controversial. I'm too radical for the algorithm to go crazy with my shows. And the best shows are the ones that are most radical. So if you want to help the show grow, you have to do it. Nobody else can do it. Minnesota Representative Radtke posts ICE locations live. Incitement? No. Why is it incitement? It's a free speech, information, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with people going to where ICE is and filming them. It is being shown that ICE needs to be filmed. They're killing people. And where it hasn't been filmed, we don't know how bad it was. Where it has been filmed, we at least know. So no, it's not incitement, it's public service. It's a public service. It's a service to all of us. James, I've heard MAGA people argue we cannot be afraid to do something because the left might do it in the future. Principles. We have to initiate a fascist dictatorship before we get a woke dictatorship. Yeah. I mean, what they lack is, they lack principles. So it's not, the reason they shouldn't do something is not because the left could do it, could use the same laws to do something even bigger. The reason they shouldn't do it is because it's wrong, because it's bad, because it's anti-constitutional, anti-American, anti the principles of this country. That's why they shouldn't do it. And, so they shouldn't institute a dictatorship, not in order to prevent the left from doing a dictatorship. They shouldn't do a dictatorship, but having a dictatorship is inherently wrong, anti-American. But they can't get that. They can't think in principles. Principles are beyond them. Rez, $200 Australian. Thank you. That is fantastic. Really appreciate it. Thank you again for what you do. Your strong, unwavering stand against the obvious government overreach, even in the face of harsh opposition against you, and the loss of subscribers is inspiring and a true demonstration of all the fundamental virtues of objectivism. I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's people, you guys who are listening and supporting the show, who inspire me to keep going. Because you guys have got my back, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Bonnie says, how did such a limited government get so huge? Well, slippery slopes, slow erosion, little violations. Once you undo a principle, the principle is gone, and then you undo it even more and more and more and more and more. Just everything grows. Slippery slopes exist all the time, everywhere you go. That's why you have to stick with principles. James says, as crime is getting lower than ever and we're getting richer than ever, I know many group of people who've inherited 7 figures. Why are we getting more nihilistic and fearful than ever? Because the reality is that, the nihilism and the fear have nothing to do with wealth, and they have nothing to do with crime. They have everything to do with ideas. Philosophy is the driver of history. Philosophy is the driver of culture. Philosophy determines our fearfulness, determines our nihilism. And it's our lack of capacity to reason which leads to fear. It's our abandonment and lack of ability to comprehend values and to value anything which leads to our nihilism. And those are philosophical issues, and philosophical issues that are, sadly, the issues are encouraged and fed by our educational system. Enric, just go with Enric. Is it a problem that the executive can select the judiciary members to be approved? Does that further the dominating power of the executive branch? It hasn't in the past because it's they've needed usually they need 60 votes to get a Supreme Court nominee approved. and filibusters were applied. My position on filibuster is today that I'm for filibuster if it's actually practiced. That is, somebody has to stand up and start speaking. That is, I'm against non-speaking filibusters. I'm against the automatic filibuster. I think that's a cop-out. But look, it's inevitable. There's no shortcuts here. The courts are going to reflect the politics of the time. And, given that we sometimes have Democrats, sometimes have Republicans, the court will reflect that alternating state. Liam, would you classify China as a mixed economy or fascist? God, it's a mixed economy leaning towards more fascism. But, it's not like fascism and communism are the only two systems. It's a statist regime with elements of mixed economy, but it dominantly statist because it controls everything at the end. It is the final decision maker, and it has no limitations. It has no limiting factor. It's statist, so whether it's particularly fascist or I don't know if those terms necessarily always apply to every regime. Statist is the best way. The state dictates. Liam, are the Arab countries more fascist than socialist? Well, they're not socialist, but are they fascist? Again, not if you understand fascism as the ideology of Mussolini. They're monarchies, they're statist authoritarians. Not everything has to be fascist or socialist. It could be, there are other unnamed forms of statism. The umbrella is statism. But like Saudi Arabia is a monarchy, right? Hopper Campbell, is MAGA a vocal minority? Most of the country is disgusted by Trump and wants him gone. Well, certainly MAGA is a vocal minority. Whether I think most of the country would like Trump gone. Don't know who they'd vote for. That is, if it was Trump versus AOC, I don't know who they'd vote for, right? So how desperate are they to get Trump gone? And if the economy picks up next year, will that change their mind? How principled is the public, or is it mostly just because they feel like the economy's not doing well, so they hate Trump? And if the economy changes, they love Trump. I don't know. I don't know how deep it goes, in other words. Hopper Campbell, Trump says the United States shouldn't even have an election in 2026 because of all his accomplishments. Do you think he's feeling confident enough to rig the election to ignore the results of the elections? Well, I mean, he was confident enough in 2020 to try. I think he's like 100 times more confident now. So I wouldn't put it beyond him at all. At all. Both rig and try to overturn it afterwards. And I heard him say, shouldn't even have an election because he's so good, he's so confident, and he got such a mandate. Why would you even need an election? It's clear what the American people want. It's being channeled through him. He's a typical dictator in that sense. We will see. In less than a year, we will know the answer to that. Not Chavez algorithm. Fascism is the stage reached after communism is proven an illusion. I don't think that's right. Fascism did not come out of communism. Arguably, it came out of socialism, but it did come out of communism. And, fascism came out of fascism. Qua fascism is an Italian phenomenon, Mussolini, and it had nothing to do with communism. Michael, what should happen to people who cross a border? Nothing absent proof of violent, fraudulent conduct. A border marks a jurisdiction. The mere act of crossing it without more doesn't violate anyone's rights. I think that's absolutely right. In an ideal society, that is definitely the right approach. Right? This border is meaningless other than whose jurisdiction are you under. Jerome, hi, Yaron. Can you explain the idea that the Constitution being a social contract, agreement across individuals and then individual states? Thank you. I don't actually view it as a social contract. A social contract is an idea from Hobbes and Rousseau. There's some kind of agreement of the governed. And I don't think that's true. None of us signed anything. We're not asked to sign anything. We haven't actually agreed to it one way or the other. So I don't think it's actually a social contract in a sense that we all acquiesce to it, we all agree to it, because we don't. And indeed, the U.S. Constitution was imposed on the people. The states voted for it, but even there, it's a majority. It was democratically voted. There were minorities that voted against it, and yet it still applies to them. A contract is something that you have to agree to. Not that somebody else votes for. You have to agree to it if you're a party to the contract. So I don't view it as a contract. I think that's confusing. A constitution is it's a consequence of the recognition that individuals have rights and that those rights need to be protected by government, and how they are protected needs to be articulated in a government that limits how that government protects those rights and what it does in order to protect them. And it's a recognition that this is good for people even if they don't know it. From a political sense, it's good for people even when they don't know it, because it leaves them free to use their minds to do what they want, as long as they're not violating other people's rights, which is a moral principle that must be abided by in order for us to live in a society that is civilized. So I'm interested to see what some of our philosophers say about the idea of a social contract, but I don't like that notion. Not your average algorithm. The Willian redefinitions are pretty staggering. It's not hard to see the difference between an army whose soldiers come to kill us versus immigrants who come to work for us. I know, it's stunning. It's unbelievably upsetting. And what's really upsetting is why people can't just see right through it, and why people continue to use that terminology, even people who you think would know better. So, and they use the constant use of those kind of terms is just awful. Oops. Clark. Will Trump's invasion of Greenland be the start of World War III? Will American soldiers even fight for a fascist leader? I don't think it'll be a start of World War III. I don't think anybody will oppose the United States if it goes into Greenland. I think NATO will make a lot of noise, but won't do anything. Will American soldiers fight for a fascist leader? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Particularly after Hegseth has cleared out all the generals who might oppose him. But again, we will see. We will see what the state of the American military really is. Sadly, we will see that in the months to come. James, will the ARI Center in Austin, Texas be like Ayn Rand Museum exhibit? Anyone can just walk in and get a pamphlet, check out books, or attend paid lectures. So it's going to have, it's definitely going to have an element of paid lectures. I don't know that we'll check out books. I don't know that there'll be a library in that sense. But there'll definitely be lectures, debates, events that are going on there. There'll be a library where you can sit and work and look at books, and maybe a coffee shop. I don't know what's being decided about that. That'll be one section. On another section, there will be an exhibit, or more likely an experience, where you will, I don't want to give it away, but where you will interact with material around Ayn Rand's novels and Objectivism. And anybody can walk off the street and theoretically and do this. There'll be opening hours. There'll be opening hours for the library. There'll be opening hours for the events, and there'll be opening hours for this exhibit. There will also be the offices and classrooms of the Ayn Rand Institute and ARU. Molten Splendor, thanks for keeping up the fight, speaking out for freedom and individual rights, and calling ICE agents murderers. Thank you, Molten Splendor. I appreciate that. And as I said, you guys have my back, and I really, really appreciate that. I know it's not easy right now. Clark, ICE agents want to eat at a family-owned Mexican restaurant in Minnesota, and guess what? Hours later, they arrested the very staff who served them. It's just so stupid, so evil, so evil. Yeah. Florida, Nick. Florida South College has the single largest collection of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings and offers daily tours. The campus was designed by him. Yeah, I need to go there sometime. I mean, wow. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I don't know where it is. I'm not sure where Florida Southern College is, but I need to figure that out. And on one of my trips to Florida, I need to make sure to go there. So thanks for reminding me that exists. I'm a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan. And I'm just looking at a map where it is. It's not far from Tampa. It's between Tampa and Orlando. All right, next time I'm in either Tampa or Orlando, got to make it out there. All right, Clark, physical appearance can never be probable cause. Absolutely. Absolutely. John, do you agree with Binswanger, who compares Trump and ICE to SS? Does Binswanger know that Himmler headed the SS and was second to Hitler as the architect of the final solution? Yeah, I think Binswanger knows that. And if you think about Miller as basically running the operations of ICE, not officially, but for all practical reasons, there's a lot of similarities. You know, I know that Miller is Jewish, but he's got that evil streak in him that makes him such. Look, I don't think ICE is SS yet, but I think that, as somebody else pointed out, I think ICE is the testing ground for whether the American people will tolerate something that is more like the SS. And I wouldn't be surprised if they can get away with it, and this might not happen, but if they can get away with it, that ICE evolves into something and develops into something that looks a lot more like a kind of an SS. I mean, think about demanding now that we have papers and show them to ICE. That's a big step. And while the SS went after Jews, you know, ICE is going after immigrants, not treating them quite as badly, but pretty badly. And of course, the SS also evolved. It started out just much more thuggish street gangs, and it evolved into this fine-tuned machine of murder, of genocide. So I don't think anybody thinks that ICE is the SS at its peak. But ICE might be kind of the beginnings, the way the SS was at the very beginning. The similarities are not that crazy, at all. Liam, due to the missing link problem in the culture, can people today not get beyond socialism or fascism? That's all the crow can handle. Will bounce back between these two as we circle the drain. Well, I mean, again, it depends on the ones who are not part of the missing link, the ones who have their conceptual faculty. Do they rise to the challenge? Do they voice an opinion? Do they draw people away from these, nutty positions? It depends on the people who are more intellectual, who have the cognitive ability. Too many of them in the service of evil ideology. But if we can replace them, if we can have more intellectuals making the case, and look, there are courageous people out there arguing the same thing I'm arguing. We just need more of them. If there are enough of them, then maybe we can walk away from the abyss and start rebuilding. Tom, SCOTUS rulings expose the ideas that drive the country. The most obvious ruling was the one that weekend, the 11th Amendment. SCOTUS altered the 11th. I don't know what ruling you're talking about. Sorry. I have to brush up on that ruling because I'm not sure what it is. John says, seems like Congress is focused on making as much money for themselves as possible. Seems they all become millionaires within a few years. Yeah, insider trading is a prevalent activity within Congress and bribery, not suitcases of cash handed, but speaking gigs and all kinds of other gigs, particularly when they leave office. Yes, Congress is uninterested in actually governing based on the principles of America. That's the one thing that I'm interested in. All right, Christo, we want Greenland. We'll take Greenland. Not even Putin talks in this way. Trump is becoming a proper dictator. Yeah, I mean, Putin is far more intellectual and much more intelligent than Trump. Trump is a poor man's Putin, kind of a dumbed down Putin. I mean, Putin really does say, we want Ukraine, we'll take Ukraine. But he brings, an array of historical facts and arguments and issues and philosophical arguments about the nature of Russia and what it is to the table, because he is, he ran the KGB. He's no idiot. He has a vast intellectual and background, and he's smart. Trump is just a thug. He's Putin without all that. We want Greenland. We'll take Greenland. Andrew, why in the world did Netanyahu deter Trump from attacking Iran? I don't know. Netanyahu, I mean, I think he was worried about a massive missile attack against Israel, and he thought the plan that Trump proposed to attack Iran was too weak and didn't address the concerns that he, and for that matter, the Saudis and the Qataris had about a counterattack. So I think he thought it was going to be too weak and maybe needed to focus differently. I don't know that we'll ever know. On Mirkat, I like the people of Iran more than many Western nations now. I agree. Massive respect. Vibed to opposition music at work all day yesterday. That's great. That's great. On Mirkat. And he didn't have the thing about Gaza, which he always does. So I'm not sure he's getting soft. I think on Mirkat is. Is Israel worried if the U.S. strikes Iran now, they won't be prepared for Iran's counterattack of waves of faster ballistic missiles than they can't intercept? I think Israel is worried that the U.S. strike is not strong enough and not focused on the right targets. And that, yes, there'll be this counterattack that the United States and Israel are not prepared to actually defend against. That, I think, is the main worry. I mean, Israel should do it. So Israel should go out there and bomb what they think that needs to be bombed. First, bomb the ballistic missiles. Problem is, those are very, very well protected. But and it would be great if the United States joined in with their bunker-busting bombs. And then do regime change. So first, you get rid of the ability of the Iranians to do damage to Israel, and then you get rid of the regime institutions. But Israel needs to do it. If the United States won't do it, Israel has to do it. This is the time. This will give it the legitimacy. It cannot wait, because Israel's survival depends on getting rid of this regime. Conservatives use the language of America as a facade, whereas the left is open about their authoritarianism and don't pretend they are continuing the American tradition. I agree, absolutely. Marius, from a pure military perspective, is requiring the legislative to declare war not thwarting the element of surprise, or is it, or is a secret session efficient? It could be under certain circumstances, and you could, at the very least, put together a secret session or declare war immediately after the operation begins. But that's not the case, for example, in Venezuela, where all Congress could have done is, we generally approve the use of force against Venezuela without any specifics, without timing, and without whether it will actually happen or not, just approving it. And that's all you would need, right? You would need Congress just to step in and says, yeah, if at some point the U.S. does use force, or within the next year, within the next 2 years, it's approved. We gave authority. Steve-O, does objectivism hold that federalism is an important interest? Is it more important than the supremacy clause? What do you think the outcome would be in Berkeley versus Troy, if you know the case. I don't know the case. So it's federalism is not that important. What's important is the protection of individual rights. Federalism is a means by which to restrict the growth of the central government and to allow smaller governments, i.e. states, to experiment with the protection of rights where it is optional. Like what sentences should different crimes be? What exact definition is of first-degree murder versus second versus third degree, which each state could do differently? Things like that. So the supremacy clause is there when rights are violated by the states. But in the realm of trying to protect rights, there's optionality. That should be left to the states. Marius, should liberal democracies stop diplomacy with illegitimate governments on principle, like Iran, for example? Yes, absolutely. If you listen to my talks on foreign policy, I advocate for a system where we have no embassies in the worst countries out there. Steve-O, do you think states have gone in the right direction on abortion rights since Dobbs? Do you know about the Wyoming opinion, January 6, 2026? What do you think of it? No, I don't think states have gone in the right direction. In my view, abortion is an inalienable right. And given that the Supreme Court will not protect it as an inalienable right, I think that the state governments needed to protect it as a right. Every single state in the union should have been pro-abortion and passed legislation to protect a woman's right to abort. And that should have been throughout the country. I think it's horrific that there are a third of the states in the country that deny a woman abortion in almost all cases. And then there's another chunk of states that deny a woman right to abortion in many circumstances. So I just think it's an individual right. It's a right of a woman. It should be protected at the federal level. Marius, what's the correct solution to prevent Islamic terrorism from domestic solution to prevent Islamic terrorism from domestic terrorists? I don't understand the question. Getting rid of blasphemy laws, surveillance. Well, I mean, the correct solution to prevent Islamic terrorism. The solution is to monitor those who advocate for an ideology we view as an enemy ideology, Islamism, to survey them, and those who preach that ideology, who are actively encouraging people to live by that ideology, should be deported, should leave the country. Now, if they're citizens, then it could be viewed as treason once you identify the particular ideology and those who represent it as the enemy. But that would require an act of Congress. Hi, Yaron. What is your favorite country to visit so far? Do you think everyone should hold world travel as a value? Why? Oh, I don't know. I love so many places I travel to, and it really depends on why I'm there and what I'm doing there. For work, I love London in England because it's English and they speak English, and because London's such an amazing city, and there's so much history and there's so much culture and there's a real vibe to London, which I really, really enjoy, in spite of the growth of the number of Muslims there. In spite of that, I still think London's a great city. What was the other thing? I definitely, unquestionably think that world travel is a value. It's so cheap. It's so easy today. There's so many interesting things to see about around the world. The history of Europe, which is the history of Western civilization. The history of Greece and the Renaissance in Italy, the Asia and what it's done over the last 50 years, and the success, but also the fact that there's a different culture out there that embraces some Western values and can be successful. Japan is amazing. South Korea is amazing. China is amazing, although I don't know that I would go there now, but China's amazing. but Thailand and Cambodia, to see what poverty really looks like and what ancient civilization they had, which is interesting. There's just so much to see in the world. I love traveling. I could travel all the time. There's so many interesting people to meet, so many beautiful things to see, beautiful people, beautiful places, beautiful skyscrapers, beautiful cities, beautiful nature, beautiful animals. Go on safari in Africa. I mean, there's no end to it. And it's just life. It makes life more interesting. So I consider it a pretty high value. Will, $100. Thank you, Will. This land is mine really hits home today. Thank you for getting as articulately pissed as you do. Thank you. This Land is Mine, absolutely. One of my top 5 movies of all time. Literally one of my top 5 movies of all time. This Land is Mine by Jean Renoir and Charles Laughton. I think Maureen O'Hara. A movie that's almost impossible to find out there. Go watch it. Go watch it. You'll see what a police state looks like and the courage that it takes from people and how that courage manifests itself. Basically, the theme of the movie is the nature of courage and the nature of courage and the different forms it takes, from physical to the spiritual, and how it manifests in the lives of different people, and how a coward becomes a hero, how a coward becomes brave. And it's one of the most touching, most inspiring movies you can see, and very applicable to the world in which we live now. It was made in the 40s during World War II, about World War II, about Nazi occupation of a town in Europe. P. Gupta, is New York Times video analysis now enough to charge? It should be. I think they already had enough, but I doubt that they'll be charged. I'm not sure who will do the charging. I'm not sure under whose jurisdiction they fall. Steve-O, do you know of other podcasts that answer every super chat like you? Maybe one that focuses on law and legal opinion? I don't know. I mean, the Volk Conspiracy is a good legal blog. I don't know if they have podcasts, but I don't know. I don't know if there is anybody who answers all the super chats like I do. And the only reason I can do this is because Miroslav created this amazing app. Basically, it sits on my browser that collects all your super chat questions and keeps them for me so that I can get to them ultimately. Because otherwise, I'd be overwhelmed by them. Marius, is ending a dictatorship through offensive wars a legitimate use of force? Does the UN not work to achieve the opposite? UN is an abomination. The UN should be dismantled, or it should be sent off and based in Caracas or some other, or maybe Pyongyang in North Korea. So I despise the UN. The UN, in my view, has no authority, no legitimacy, no force of anything, morality, politically, nothing. It should be ignored. The United States should leave it and stop funding it. Is any dictatorship through offensive wars a legitimate use of force? It couldn't be. It really depends on the people doing the ending and what their motivation is. And certainly, Iran is not just ending dictatorship. It's making the world safer for Americans and for American interests. Lucinda, it's driving me mad that the worst kind of enemies of America and what it stands for are doing it in the name of America. I'm more American than any of those bastards at ICE. I second you. You definitely are more American than any of those bastards at ICE. Absolutely, Lucinda. And stay an American. Even if you don't come here, stay an American. What's most frustrating, she continues, isn't that the people can't see through it, but that many could but choose not to. Absolutely. And that with a lot of them, they choose not to see for the most petty and fears and envies. Yeah, it really is driven by fear. It really is driven by fear and hate. Hate of illegals, fear of reality, fear of life. Thank you, Lucinda. Red liberals. Weren't Mussolini and his dad Marxists originally, or left anarchists? Is fascism the only way to save capitalism, liberalism, and democracy from violent leftist murdering communists and populists. Why would you want to? Like, if you had a choice between communism and fascism, why would you choose fascism? I mean, I wouldn't. You know, why is fascism not as bad as communism? So, and how do you save capitalism by embracing fascism? Fascism is the opposite of capitalism. Fascism is the opposite of liberalism. Fascism is the opposite of democracy. So how do you save any of those things by embracing the exact opposite, the opposite? So the fascists win and the communists win when you think the only alternative is communism or fascism. No, the alternative is Americanism. The alternative is capitalism. And we should fight for capitalism. And if the choice is fascism or communism, you should fight both of them. Go underground. Leave the country. But you cannot embrace fascism. That's anti-everything you claim to believe in. Mussolini was a leftist. Absolutely. He was a socialist, and that's why fascism is not far from socialism. Fascism is a form of socialism or a form of statism, depending on how you categorize things. All right. Thank you, guys. Really, really, really appreciate the support, particularly when I do these impassioned and controversial topics that I know lose me people, but I also know that they gain me people, and they certainly gain your support. So you've been incredibly generous today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Lucinda just came in with, in my old school, little kids, some even under 10, had to do little written texts and posters about how awesome the UN is. Absolutely horrid. Yes, it's very European. Europeans love the UN. But yes, UN is an abomination. I could do a whole show just on how the UN is an immoral abomination. If anybody wants to sponsor that show, $1,000 sponsors shows. I'll talk about anything you would like me to talk about for $1,000. All right, guys. We used to have a lot of show sponsorships, so if anybody wants that, happy to do it. I need to run for dinner. I'll see you all on Monday. No show tomorrow. I'll see you Monday. Hope you have a great weekend in spite of all this that's going on in the world. So I'll see you Monday. Thank you. Bye, everybody.